All right, hey everybody, welcome back to Craft Talk. I'm your host Tito, and today I have a special guest. I would probably say my most special guest, my wife, my partner, Amanda. Applause, yes. Do you want to say hi?
I said hi, you probably just didn't hear me.
I know,
I probably whispered.
I'm going host mode.
Yeah.
So I wanted to invite you on Craft Talk because I wanted to celebrate a special milestone with you. This episode marks the 50th episode of Craft Talk.
Wow.
So
crazy.
Yeah. So I wanted to celebrate it with you because I think that's just like a really big accomplishment that usually I would be like, oh, 50, that's it. You and I always talk about like smelling the roses.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing.
50 is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was like a statistic that I found online. It was like a few years ago. I don't know if it's actually true, but it fits my narrative, so I'm gonna go with it.
Okay.
There was a statistic a few years ago that came out that said 90% of podcasts stop at episode 3, and the remaining 10%, 90% of that, which is basically 9%, 90% of that only go as far as 20 episodes.
Okay.
So if you make it 21 episodes, you're of the 1%.
So if you make it 50?
If you make it 50, I don't know what the stat is, and I don't know over the last few years if that's like changed at all.
Sure.
But
either way,
it's something, and it's something that like I don't usually would recognize.
Yeah.
And it's weird to think about, in that like it's hard to admit to yourself, oh, you're actually doing the thing.
Yeah.
And part of the idea that I wanted to talk to you about was kind of like, it's an overused term, the whole imposter syndrome thing.
Yes.
But I'm wondering, and I would love for you to share kind of this feeling of like, for me, it's like, okay, I hit episode 50.
Yeah.
By statistical like data, it's saying that to hit even 21 episodes, you're of like a rare like category.
Right.
But I still don't feel like I'm
a podcast.
Or do that thing. So you have experienced a journey in the last 5 years, decade?
I mean, you could say from, gosh, I don't even know, since I was 8. It depends on how far you want to go back. I mean, realistically, because I know what you're referring to, like 2020 till now, but even prior to that, the journey to get to 2020. Till now, so a long time.
let's reel it all the way back into you decided to make kind of like climb this mountain to become a PA, which is a physician assistant. You are currently a PA.
Yes. And
to become a PA, it was this entire decade, probably longer journey to get to.
Yeah.
So I'm yapping. So I would love to just hear you tell me about what that 10-year journey is, why it started.
And why it took so long.
Why it took so long.
Yeah, I guess you can go back even like further from when I was even like a little kid, I guess. Like I always had this probably potentially like weird interest in medicine from a very young age, I think. My dad had briefly worked as like an EMT, and he probably had like his EMT textbook or something that I would randomly sometimes find, and I would flip through it because there were lots of pictures, and I just found it fascinating. And so I was just like, ooh, this is cool or interesting, which is, again, probably kind of weird for a kid that young, but I was like oddly fascinated by it for some reason. One of my grandmothers, she was like chronically ill. She was sick a lot, and I think I had this part of my brain where I didn't understand what was happening, and I knew that, but I think I wanted to know what was happening because she suffered from a lot of strokes and TIAs and things, and as a kid that's like scary, and you're like, oh, what's happening?
What's TIA?
Sometimes the nickname is like a mini stroke, but it's like a transient ischemic attack, or basically there's like a brief lack of oxygen to the brain, but it's not like permanent necessarily. So it's like a different level of a stroke, kind of, as like a basic way to think about it, I guess. I just became kind of fascinated about like what's happening with her. And I remember in 6th grade, we had this opportunity to write a research report on like whatever we wanted, like any topic in the world. And I remember I was between two ideas. I was either going to write about Michigan, the football team, because I love Michigan Wolverines. I was either going to do that, or I was going to write about strokes and TIAs. One of my good friends at the time, she was also a big Michigan Wolverines fan, and she really wanted to write about Michigan. So I was like, sure, you go ahead and do that, and I'm going to write this report about strokes as a 12-year-old using my dad's EMT book. So that's what I did. And I wrote a report about it.
Only one person can do?
Yeah, only one person could have a topic. So you couldn't share topics. So I was like, well, I didn't have much competition for my stroke and TIA research project. So that's what I wrote about.
Do you remember what the other kids' like projects were? Because this is really interesting in that like, you were fascinated about strokes in 6th grade. And there's obvious interests that children might have where it's like, oh, sports, or my favorite football team, or Beanie Babies, or
cats, or I'm going to write about a dog, or I don't know. I remember those were my two options, and I remember not writing about Michigan Wolverines because my friend wanted to do that, and I was like, well, this is the other thing I'm currently interested in. So that's what I did. And so I've always had this interest in medicine. But also never really believed, I mean, I guess like this is why you're talking about imposter syndrome, because I never really believed, I guess, that somebody like me could do that, would go into medicine, would become a doctor, become a PA, become whatever, fill in the blank. And so I struggled with a lot of like confidence around it, and also just my brain is very logical, and so I would always think about the process, about like, well, you know, when you look at the journey of how do you become a PA, how do you become a doctor on paper, when you see all the steps laid out, it's very daunting. And you're just like, I don't think, how do I navigate that? I don't have anybody to really help me navigate that. It's incredibly expensive. It's so much time. How do I make money in the, you know, to be a PA, it's a minimum of 6.5 years. To be a doctor, obviously, it's 10 to 15 years. How would I support myself? So there are so many questions that it just became this overwhelming thing. So it was like, I'm interested, but I don't know if that's for me. So it was always kind of in the back burner of my brain. And I would
even all the way from back then, like, it was the lofty idea of like, you kind of like, if you were to shoot straight up, that's where it would be, but you were tempering yourself. Because it was just like, again, I didn't have any role models around me who had pursued something like that lofty, right? Or it just didn't seem like a reasonable goal to have. I mean, it's a crazy dream for like this kid who grew up in a trailer park and has always fought the stereotypes associated with that, of this idea in the back of my brain of like, people like me don't get to do that. Even if I'm potentially capable of it, it just was a hard thing for me to even think possible. Just because, I'm just like, what am I going to be, the one to break the stereotype? And like, I don't know. I mean, there was just so many barriers, and one of the biggest barriers is finances. And you've already taken it off your list just because it's like one of those things that just wasn't possible at the time, you know, to nobody's fault of their own. It's just the way that it was.
It was just the circumstances. So it was always, for me, whenever I would come up with something that maybe required grad school, I'd be like, okay, cool, there's grad school, but like, what could I do with an undergrad that I could get a job with? So initially, when I did start college, you know, I was bouncing around with, do I get like a nursing degree, because I could at least work as a nurse, and then I could pursue something to make money and maybe save up and maybe be able to go to grad school, which at the time I thought was physical therapy. But I was like losing interest in things so quickly, which is also probably good. Something that I struggle with is like, something feels really fascinating in the moment, and then when I get into it, I'm like, I'm kind of bored now. So I would have a hard time like sticking with something, because it was fun until it wasn't, and then I was just like, I really don't care to study this in depth about orthotics.
That's the truest thing you could say. It's like, it was fun until it wasn't.
And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, I don't...
Do you feel like that comes from somewhere in like, Do you feel like you lost interest a lot, like with things, or?
I don't know. I feel like I have an issue with commitment, maybe, which is interesting because I mean we've been like married for
Forever.
so long, but I have a hard time with just like sticking with things. I think I'm very quick to be like, oh, it's fun, it's interesting. Well, now I'm bored. Now it's hard. Now it's whatever, and I'm like, like I don't. So I think I'm quick to sometimes.
Do you think it's
pivot.
a commitment issue, or are you allergic to feeling like you're stuck in that box of like physical therapy, right?
Yeah.
So like for a little while, you wanted to pursue this thing of physical therapy, and once you start going into a specific route, you kind of start forming the boundaries around the thing that I'm going to do is this, and anything outside of that doesn't fall in line with the goal of physical therapy.
Right.
From knowing you, I feel like it's less about commitment rather than like you don't like being put in this like box. The symptom maybe is you start feeling bored of it because you don't want to get stuck in just doing physical therapy.
Yeah, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's not so much commitment. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
I could be wrong. I mean, I'm just saying.
But I think that is true. It's there is this fear of like, oh my God, if I commit to this one thing, I'm stuck with that, and like, how do I know right now that I want to do this for 30 years?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. What if I change my mind?
Right.
Then what?
Yeah, maybe it's more, what if I made the wrong choice?
Yeah. And then you've invested so much time, you've invested so much money.
Yeah.
So then what do you do?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was also a fear of just like, well, what if I do pursue this big long thing, and then I again get bored, or I'm stuck, or I don't really like it anymore, and it feels like something that because there was such an investment that went into it, you're not allowed to pivot or change. So I think there was definitely a fear of getting stuck or pursuing something and then just being like, I don't know about this anymore.
There's this kind of business idea called like the sunk cost theory, where, you know, if you're putting money or investing money into like a specific business venture, or just with anything, like time and investment and money, you're putting it into something, and there's a certain point when something's not working.
Yeah.
The right answer is actually to just cut your losses. But this whole psychological idea of sunk costs, of like, well, I've already spent all this time, resources, money into something, just completely cutting my losses, it's a loss.
Right.
It's you're almost gambling at that point. You're just like, well, I need to just kind of go all in and just keep trying to like make it work when it usually doesn't.
Right.
It's really tough to get out of that.
Yeah.
You know, like in poker or cards in general, they have this term called like full tilt. Like he's tilting or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like you're going tunnel vision and like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's that idea of, is it worth it? You found a way to kind of almost cut your losses because you didn't want to be stuck in those boundaries.
I was the classic, like, you just bounce around in undergrad, trying different things. So like I went to school for 4 years and didn't graduate with anything because I just couldn't decide. And in the midst of being in undergrad, and when I was kind of pursuing, at one point I decided to pursue like a physical therapy assistant and got into that program. And I was like, this is kind of the bridge to, well, I can do this. It's only 2 years. I'll get a job and then I can kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
But again, I was starting to like, I don't know if I really like the program or if I like this. And then in the middle of all of that, I got my diagnosis of diabetes. And then I became fascinated and obsessed with learning about like, well, what was happening with my body? What can I do to like, you know, just learning about like nutrition and all these different things. And so it was the perfect thing to like pivot to, because I completely lost interest in anything physical therapy related. I was like, I don't care anymore. This is boring. I'm wasting my time.
Boring.
It was stressful. I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go back to pursuing something that is more related to this, because this is now kind of becoming
It's
a
part of
large
you
part
now.
of
Yeah.
me, and obviously anything that I'm learning is going to help myself out. So at that point, we got married, and so I moved to Florida, and so I left school.
Yeah.
And was just kind of working for a while, trying to figure it out, and was working in nutrition, and then eventually
A brief stint at retail, Macy's.
Macy's.
The mall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that job, but
it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I'm not a salesman.
Yeah.
That was rough,
yeah.
but you do what you got to do.
You got the Black Friday schedule,
And
you
I
were
quit.
like,
That was, again, things got rough, and I was like, I'm out of here. Like, I'm not going to be folding clothes on Black Friday and up in the middle of the night, because I would have had to work the night shift.
right.
And I don't stay up in the middle of the night. Like,
Yeah, sleep is a
yeah.
superior priority for you. Yeah.
I should never be awake at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
It's just not good for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was we're not doing this.
Yeah.
But again,
We were
just got
making it
married
work.
and moved to
Yeah,
Florida. I needed something, and it was an experience, and it's a fun story
Yeah.
now, and just funny to look back on that time. I was just working. I didn't really know what to pursue. Student loans are a thing, so you're just like, how do we navigate that? Do I want to go back to school and take out more of them? But eventually, I did. I started taking online classes because I kind of thought, the new direction I was going to stick with is nutrition and becoming a dietitian. That made the most sense and the most fit.
Because of your personal experience with diabetes.
Yeah, and just where my interest was.
Yeah.
It was something that I was just heavily interested in. I was invested in it. It made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But then, as I was working and in school taking these online classes, because I was working in nutrition at the time, I started talking to a lot of people and just getting people's insight who were doing the job that I was pursuing.
Which was nutritionist.
Dietitian.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking to a lot of dietitians and just kind of getting their insight on, hey, what is it like to do this? Are you happy with your career? What are barriers that you see? This was over 10 years ago, so I don't know what the rules are now versus when I lived there. Things are so constantly changing with what people are able to do. But at the time and at the particular location that I worked at, there was a lot of maybe frustration that the dietitians were having with how limited they were with what they were allowed to do in terms of patient care. They didn't have a lot of independent decision making at the time. And so a lot of people were getting frustrated, and they would get into the field and it was cool for a while, and then you would hit the ceiling really quickly in what you were allowed to do, and then you would just kind of plateau and there was nowhere to go. A common thing that I kept hearing was, if I could do it again, I'd probably go to PA school. And I was like,
Interesting.
oh, well, that's interesting.
Come on, man. I just figured this out.
So I was just I started sitting with that for a while, and I was like, again, the whole, well, how do I get a job, right? That makes money. So I was like, well, maybe I could just finish my degree in dietetics, work as a dietitian for a little while, and then eventually go into PA school. Maybe that's fine. So that was kind of the thought I was having. The longer I sat with that, I was like, well, that just feels like a waste of time. If I know I'm going to end up wanting to go in this other direction anyway, why not rip the Band-Aid off and just go for it?
Yeah.
Why do this middle ground? Because, to be a registered dietitian, it is a 4-year degree. I thankfully had a lot of the building blocks for it, but I didn't have a lot of the building blocks that would check the box for the actual degree.
Yeah.
It still probably would have taken 3 years because of all the chemistry classes and things, and then you have to do internships and get all these clinical
all
hours
these prerequisites
and sit for an exam.
Yeah.
So I was just it's still going to take probably 3 to 4 years to satisfy that, and then I'm going to want to work for a while, and then there's grad school. So why don't we just figure out what is necessary for PA school and just start over again and just pursue that if that's where I think I'm going to go. And ultimately, that's what I decided to do. Stop taking the courses at the online school I was going to in preparation for dietetics, and it was just kind of a moment of, let's put everything on pause, let's quit my job enroll at UCF, University of Central Florida, and just do a pre-med degree, which I was like, it should take about 2 years to do that, and then figure out what grad school looks like after that.
What do you think? So to even get to the point, to be able to qualify for a PA, for a PA program, there is all these prerequisites.
Yes.
And at that time, you were kind of a few years removed from college.
Yeah.
So there's all these prerequisites, and a lot of the classes or credits that would have counted, you had to redo because the time has expired or whatever.
Yep.
There were all these prerequisites. I'm curious, like, how you got through those prerequisites to even just get the opportunity to be able to apply for PA school. Because at a certain point, you're just like, this is too much. I'm going to cut my losses.
Yeah.
Was there like an energy or a motivation that's made you go, I gotta do this?
Yes, because I think like in this whole like time frame, there was always this question in the back of my head, like while I was trying to figure out and pursue all these other things, I think I was also at the same time running away from the idea of pursuing a career as a provider meaning like PA, doctor, whatever.
Yeah.
I think I was using all these other avenues because ultimately I was afraid I also wasn't good enough to be a PA or a doctor. Like even if I could figure out the steps, even if we could make finances work, I didn't think I was good enough to do it. Like I just didn't think I was smart enough. I was dealing with that. Well, people like me don't get to pursue this, or I'm just, when I was growing up, people were like, oh, you're so good in school and you're like so smart. But like, I never felt that. So I was just like, I was afraid of making the decision to pursue it and then failing. But
confirming your own
my own fear that I wasn't good enough. So for me, it's like, well, I would just rather run away indefinitely and never have to face failing. But at the same time, that nagging thought in the back of my head is, if you don't try, you're never going to know. And eventually I was just like, I have to satisfy that because it's going to drive me crazy for the rest of my life if I never truly know.
Was it eating at you on a daily basis type of thing?
I don't know about daily basis, but like a regular basis, which I think is why it was also easy for me to like pivot so much with nutrition, with nursing, with physical therapy, because for a minute those were attractive enough that it seemed like it would kind of fulfill that and make quiet that voice in the back of my head. But it was still like I was running away from something that my brain was still like, yeah, this isn't it. Like you're still not doing the thing that like you're interested in doing, you're afraid of doing. And I think I just realized that voice wouldn't go away until I answered the question.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting when you think about like pursuits, how pursuits and like goals show up. It's kind of just like, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to keep trying. But rarely do you kind of think about it of going, no, you're actually doubting yourself the entire time.
Oh, absolutely.
And it seems like the feeling of I have to prove myself wrong was just slightly, barely stronger than the fear of...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, because even when I started at UCF to pursue my undergrad degree, like the undergrad degree is hard. Like you're doing physics classes, you're doing these high-level chemistry classes, and like because I had at that point been removed from being a full-time student for, I don't know, probably 4 years, not only are you're kind of entering these classes sometimes in the middle because, well, you kind of satisfied the prereq 4 years ago, but I'm like, I don't remember. Like, it's been so long. Also, I have to relearn how to be a student. I have to just relearn how to learn. And so there was a learning curve on top of the classes just being hard. And, sometimes the first 6 weeks of a class, you're figuring it out. You're figuring out how the professor tests and how do you prepare for things. And sometimes the first exam wouldn't go well, and I would either like fail it or come close to failing, or for me, fail and barely pass. But, the whole time, the fear of me not being good enough was about to get reinforced. And it was really difficult for me to not quit in the middle of that, because it'd be like, I failed a physics test. Like, there's no way I'm going to get into PA school. Like, again, we just need to call this because, again, I would rather just stop and call it on my own terms than just completely fall on my face and fail and be like, see, I told you, like, this is what my brain has been telling me the whole time. You're not good enough. I was terrified the whole time that that's what was going to happen.
I remember those calls.
It was like daily. I was daily having
I'd be at work.
meltdown.
I'd be at work. I'd step out to the parking lot because it was just like you didn't do well on a test or something like that.
And I'd be crying. And my brain was like, we have to come up with plan B. Like, what's plan B? Like, because again, to get into PA school, it's not, you just have to check the boxes of taking these classes and you have to have this undergrad degree with all these prerequisites. PA school is incredibly competitive. It's very, very difficult to get in. So you have to be a top performer. Like, getting a B in a class isn't good enough. Like, you're striving for that 4.0. You're striving for A's and like solid A, not an A minus in every class. You're trying to build as strong of a resume as you can. So like, just passing or getting a B or getting an average grade, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
And so, you know, anytime I wouldn't do well on something, it was this panic of like, what am I doing? I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so my brain, I was like, I need to have plans A, B, C, A through Z, essentially, of like, if this doesn't work, what is my next pivot to? Because I was terrified the whole time that I was just going to reinforce that idea of, see, you're not good enough.
I think it was like a year or two into being back in your like undergrad. I felt like you started getting into the groove of like becoming a student again.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the hardest part was you being out of school for even just 1-2 years and then getting thrown back into like an academic setting. I don't know if I could do that. Because after high school, I went straight through school. I graduated and I went into the workforce and I never looked back. Like, I have a ton of respect for people who like take so much time off because they're living their life, they're working, they're trying to like make a living, decide to essentially better themselves or like, you know, whatever they feel is a betterment to themselves is like going back to school is an option to better themselves or whatever. And that transition, I don't know if I could do it because the geometry class, like the trigonometry classes that you were doing, I'm just like, why do you need this? Why do you need this? But it's just part of like the academic curriculum.
Undergrad degree that I was going for. Yeah, that one was rough. That almost sunk the ship from the beginning. That was tough. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, thankfully, I've always enjoyed school. And to an extent, like, school is a little bit of like a comfort space for me because I'm very much a person that like, tell me what the expectations are and I know how to meet this. Like, I can do, if you give me a roadmap, like, I can follow that. I know
like the
how
rubric.
to do. Yeah. Okay. You tell me to jump, I'm going to say how high. Like, what do you need from me? Give me what you need and I'm going to do it. So there's a comfort in that because I know exactly what's expected of me. Give me the syllabus and like, great, I got it.
And do you feel like the path to PA has a rubric?
I mean, yes, I will say the frustrating thing with PA schools, and again, I've been removed from even the application process for over 5 years, so I don't know if it is slowly becoming more standard or if it's still like when I was applying. Different schools have different admission criteria. So, you know, a lot of people, when they do apply to PA school, you're applying to like 5 to 10 plus schools to better your chances to get in. And it's highly likely that several of those schools have different requirements, whether it's they want different prerequisite courses, they're going to require a different amount of patient care hours, they're going to be more picky about was this class taken at a community college, and if so, we're not going to accept that credit, versus was it taken at a university, so yes, we will. So I would hope that eventually it would become a little more standard to help with that. But so yes, there's a roadmap, but the roadmap can slightly vary depending on which program you want to go to.
Different criteria. It's the same thing.
Relative,
it's the same thing with like qualifying to become a PA to get accepted to school. It's that whole percentages thing where it's just like out of this group of people, only this percentage qualifies, and out of that percentage qualifies, they probably, because you do the whole interview process, you have to have your own story, your own personal sharing of why you want to be this.
Exactly.
And
you have to show up a certain way on paper.
Yeah.
But then there is an interview process as well. So then, they want people that are personable. So not only do you have to have the academic qualifications, like you better know how to present yourself in front of somebody too, and hopefully have a good story while you're at it to make yourself a more appealing candidate, I guess.
Yeah. If we fast forward a little bit, because it's basically the last 10 years was just like school, 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 study, school, school.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. Spoiler alert, you got accepted to PA school, and it was a 2.5 year program.
The program I went to was 2.5 years, yeah.
And what was harder, getting through that program or all the undergrad prerequisite, like changing your entire life, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you evaluate those
PA school?
2 chapters, PA school?
PA school's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always did well in school.
So what was the hardest part about it?
I think, well, again, I also had a break between finishing my undergrad and going into PA school. I didn't go straight from one to another. So I, again, had almost 3 years off.
The shake off the rust moment
maybe
again.
Maybe 2 years before, in between.
Yeah.
So again, having to readjust to becoming a student again. And now I'm a student in my early 30s. So I'm like a full-on adult who is learning how to live my life and enjoying my private home life.
Yeah.
And I'm taking myself out of my comfort bubble where I'm very, very happy and content into a very intense, rigorous academic world was a big, just like a huge shift that was a struggle. And PA school is just hard. It's like trying to drink water from a fire hose. Like you're just getting like, you're just getting destroyed.
Yeah.
Because they throw so much at you, so much dense, complex information. And it's a large volume of it at one time that you have to figure out, how do I learn this, memorize it, understand it, be able to take a test, but also try to be able to practically apply it. And I mean, you're taking almost, what is it, somewhere between like 7 to 9 courses. So, I mean, it's not just one class, it's multiple. And PA school, it's very difficult. And it's funny because I was always kind of expecting what they call the didactic portion, which is basically what you think of when you think of traditional school. Like it's you show up to the classroom, you listen to a lecture, you take the test, whatever. I was expecting that to be the easy part in clinical, where you go out into clinics, hospitals, whatever, to be the more difficult side of it. I was like, because
you've been a student,
right? I've been a student. I know how to do this.
Yeah.
But even I was surprised of like, this is hard. It's a whole different level that. Even if you go to a quote unquote, like good undergrad school, like I don't think there's really a way to prepare you for it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a household effort.
Yeah.
Like we would go on walks to enhance our mental health. Just, walking is a good thing.
Try to get some fresh air and some exercise. Try to get some fresh air.
But we had note cards.
Yeah, we didn't walk without note cards.
So I would be quizzing you.
Yeah.
95% of the things on it I could not read.
Yeah.
But I'd just be like, we'd be walking and like testing you on it. And I couldn't believe how much you were retaining. And it's funny because in your head, you were just like, I'm not learning fast enough.
Yeah.
And then for me, I'm just like, just give you the certificate or whatever license that you need to become a PA, because it's just like, for someone to even just understand half of this, I'm just like, they have the capability to learn all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just mind-blowing to me, all of the chemicals and the medication and the thresholds of like whatevers that you had to learn, or like the boundaries of this is a high level of this, whatever. I don't even know what I'm talking about. I was just in awe of how much you had to retain every single semester. Yet you were just like, I am drowning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot. It's an experience. I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I'm done. Had I known I was like, I wouldn't do that again. There's no way. Like it was that hard. It was that intense. I'm very happy that I did it, and I'm very proud of myself for doing it. And that question in the back of my head is now answered of like, well, I did it.
Is there anybody in your class? Do you think anybody's ever expressed like, that was easy?
I hope not.
You're just like,
I don't want to hear it if they did think it was easy or if they thought it was fun. Don't tell me.
Yeah.
Because I did not find it to be such. And
a lot of you and your friends that have graduated there's a camaraderie.
Yeah,
and just getting wrecked.
Yeah. And well, the funny thing is I had talked to a couple people like before starting who they knew I got in and everything, and they came from like medical families and whatnot. And I remember them telling me like, oh, you're going to have so much fun in PA school. And it wasn't. It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun at all. I don't ever remember thinking, this is so much fun. I don't remember thinking that at all. Yeah. So, we obviously had very different experiences, and again, I think it's different when you go through something like that as an adult versus if I had done it 10 years ago, maybe I would have found it more fun. I don't know. But for where I was at that place in my life and just, I had I had a big perspective change on, I think, life in general when COVID happened. And for me, different things that had happened leading up to starting PA school, and honestly, a lot of things that had happened while I was in PA school. I was like, this isn't fun anymore.
Just to give people a background, you were in PA school in 2020.
Yeah, I started PA school during
in
COVID.
The midst of all that, yeah.
And so also my experience in PA school is very different from everybody who had gone that I knew prior, and everybody who's in these kind of programs now. Like my experience is going to be there's a very small percentage of people who did get to experience PA school or med school or whatever, like in the midst of COVID. So we have a very unique experience too, compared to everybody else. So that's also a part of it as well. Yeah.
So, I mean, another spoiler alert, you graduated.
I did. I made it.
You finally did do it. So
I passed my boards.
You passed your boards. You're a PA now.
I'm fully licensed. Yeah. Yes.
So let's do a little bit of a postmortem. Yeah. A little recap.
Yeah.
Lessons learned. Like, how do you feel overall in like achieving the thing that when you were younger, you've had this idea of like, oh, it would be nice. But I don't know if I will. But you end up doing it. Yeah. And you're over that mountain now. How do you feel overall? Do you feel like settled into yourself and powerful? Or do you feel like you girl boss too hard?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, tell me.
It's one of those things where I think I have to remind myself to be proud of what I accomplished, because I think on the majority of days I don't give myself enough credit for what I did do. Yeah. It's very easy for me to brush it off as, well, I just got lucky. I got lucky that I got into PA school, because I didn't do what most people did. I didn't apply to 10 plus schools. I applied to one. Yeah. And somehow I got in. But to me, like for other people, it's like, oh my God, like you must have had the best application. Like, what did you do? Like, how did you do that? And for me, I'm just like, well, I probably just got lucky. Like I genuinely, that's how I think about it. Or like, well, like, how did you get through PA? Well, I don't know. Like, I just, I don't think I'm good at giving myself the credit. So for me, I don't always feel proud of myself for what I did, because I have a hard time giving myself the credit for what I did do. And I'm just like, well, I don't know. Somehow I made it, but it wasn't pretty.
And you applying to one program was more from I think you were coming from a more practical sense. Yes. I don't know if this would have been the case if you didn't get in the first time, but I think you were of the mindset, and you tell me if I'm recounting this wrong. Yeah. You were kind of like, if they don't take me, then that's it. I'm done. That's my chance, which is hilarious.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it could have easily gone that way.
Yeah. Like you would have dropped it.
Possibly, because we were adults and we moved to Grand Rapids not only to be closer to family, but there is like
the school was there
close by and things like that. So it was very intentional. Like I picked one school very intentionally. And I was feeling so old at like 31 that like, you know, application cycles take over a year. So I'm like, if I can't get in, like I'm not going to continue to try applying in my mid 30s. Like there is a time limit here. And I think it was kind of like, well, if it's meant to be, it'll be, because even the application process is tedious. Like nothing in this process is like quick and easy, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to take the GRE, and the GRE is only good for so many years. And now I believe there's additional entrance exams that are required. So it's an
some of the
ever-evolving
classes
process.
too that you take might expire.
You only have so much time before those classes are considered null and void, and then you have to retake them again. So there was an amount of time.
I can only play this game for so long.
Right. And because it's a 5-year time limit, so if you start undergrad typically takes people 4 years, right? You've got 1 year to get in before you're already on a clock restarting to take courses. So
and you took a couple years off before you even
exactly.
Yeah.
So we were coming up
sense.
on, I had 1, maybe 2 application cycles before I was going to have to start retaking classes again for potentially like the 3rd time. So yeah. Anyway, I forgot why we were talking about this.
I think it was where we were recapping that you.
Oh, if I'm proud of myself for how I feel now.
Yeah. Like.
Yeah. Oh, did I girl boss too hard?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something I for sure kind of have to ask myself almost daily, because, imposter syndrome is very, very real, because it's like I don't even give myself credit for having gotten into school, graduated, passing my license exam, kind of feeling like it was all a fluke or all based on luck, and now all of a sudden I have this medical license. I'm a provider. I can make medical decisions for people. I'm just kind of like, what happened?
Yeah.
How did we get here? And just feeling like, you know, wow. I mean, it's a huge responsibility, and it's a responsibility that I take very seriously.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure I'm practicing like smart and safe and making good decisions for people. And that it's a lot of pressure. And so it is a little bit terrifying to be handed that, and to feel like, yeah, I am capable of doing this. I did all the things to be qualified to do this. But sometimes that feeling of just being overwhelmed of the pressure of the gravity, you're just like, are we okay? Are we sure we're glad we did this? Because it's a lot. So it's something that now the question in the back of my head, it's not what am I capable of doing it anymore. It's like, well, we did it. We've proved we can do it.
Yeah.
You know, I've been working now we're going to be coming up on 2 years pretty soon. And so I have to remind myself that, hey, like you have been doing this, like you are doing it.
Right.
But sometimes it's just like, okay, we answered the question of could we do it? So that answer is yes. And now I think sometimes it's almost like, well, do we want to do this? Because this is a lot.
Yeah.
So that is sometimes where I still find myself of like, okay.
It's the what now question.
Yeah.
It's like you've achieved the thing.
Yeah.
Now what? Like, do I feel the same? Do I, you know, it's like when like an athlete wins a championship. You hear a lot of times when somebody wins that belt.
Yeah.
Or if somebody wins a championship ring, there are some people when the moment has arrived and they climb that top of the top of that mountain, they don't feel any different. And it's like, oh, I thought I was chasing this thing. Yeah. And I don't feel, I thought it would have fixed all the broken parts of me.
Yes.
Like something would have like,
something clicks into place all of a sudden.
Yeah, it puts me whole again or something.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what it feels like right now, where it's like your entire life you've hopped around into these different things, and you get to physical therapy, and then the boundaries start closing you in, and you're like, nope, I gotta get out of that. You go into like this other thing, nope, I gotta get out of that.
Yeah.
You get into this PA mountain. Yeah. Do you feel like you've broken the curse in some sense that like, do you think you need to break out of it, or are you just trying to find ways to settle into it?
Maybe a combination of both.
Yeah.
Like when you ask, like, did accomplishing the thing ultimately like change anything for you? And I think the answer is, in a lot of ways, or in some ways maybe no. And I experienced that all the way back when I finally like finished my undergrad. Because I think I expected, even with accomplishing like that baseline goal, which is a big deal, right?
Yeah, huge.
Like getting a college degree in any capacity is big. And then I was the first, again, like first generation college grad. So like I was the first one in my family to do it. And so I think I was expecting this sense of pride to click in even when I finished that. And it was just, for me, and probably sadly, it fell very flat for me because I was like, well, that's only phase one. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count because I'm still so far away from the top of the mountain. Yeah. So I didn't even really let myself acknowledge the accomplishment of that.
Right.
And I think it's because I thought graduating from PA school, that's when I'm gonna feel different. That's when that thing is gonna click into place. It's all gonna make sense. I'm not gonna have any questions anymore. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I got there and I finished, I graduated. And I think there's a little bit of like almost like shell shock because you're just like, what just happened to me the last 2.5 years? That was so hard. And so I think there's this weird, like, well, how do I feel now? I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you go into work, and work is hard and it's overwhelming, and you have patients in front of you and you have to make these decisions. So it still kind of feels this constant state of being overwhelmed where you're like, okay, the thing, when does the thing click into place?
Yeah.
Because I still don't feel like I have
arrived
there.
Yeah.
Right. Like nothing's changed. I don't feel different. I feel as like insecure and not confident and all of those insecurities are still there. Like getting handed the piece of paper that I graduated, getting the certificate of like finally getting my license. It's like those things didn't cause the thing to click into place. And so I think that question now still lingers of like, when am I going to feel like I've arrived? And so, yeah, now it's like, did I girl boss too hard? And is this my new life of like, I'm just constantly stressed and overwhelmed when it comes to work because what I chose to do is hard.
It's a stressful environment.
It's very hard. Like, I'm sure there's people out there where it comes more naturally to them or they like the pressure. Like maybe I'm learning about myself. It's like, I can do it. I can do the things. Hand me the piece of paper. I can do it. Tell me how high to jump. I'm going to get there. Put me in a pressure cooker of a situation. I can handle it. But I think now my question is, do I want to?
Yeah.
And that's a very uncomfortable place to sit in.
Yeah.
Because I find I did all the things finally. I checked all the boxes. I did the thing that I never thought I would be able to do. And that feeling, that satisfaction hasn't fully set in. So I think now the new question in my brain is like, cool, we did it. We proved it. We got there. And now I think my brain is just like, but do we want to stay there? And so that's kind of where I'm at navigating now. You know, I'm in a transition role with my career where I started a new job. So I'm, again, relearning a lot of things. And my new specialty that I work in is different from the other specialty that I worked in. So there's, again, another learning curve.
Yeah.
And so, again, you're just in this constant... I mean, in medicine, you're forever a student.
Yeah.
Because medicine is constantly changing and evolving, which is good. But you're forever a student, and it always feels a little, always feel a little off balance. And being in my, I will still say mid-30s now, I think what I want so bad is I just want like stability and peace. And so I'm kind of trying to figure out how do I incorporate that into what I'm doing, and do those two things go hand in hand for me? And that's
what kind of things are you trying to implement in your life to counteract the stressful nature of the job?
Yeah. So
I'm asking, I know, but I'm asking as a host. So
yeah.
I know it's weird that I'm like, so tell me about.
so what do you do?
Yeah.
So I mean, the nice thing about the transition that I made in my career earlier in the year is to work part-time. So that's a big thing that I have done to try to help lessen that stress is
because while you're there, it's so intense.
and it's exhausting. And as definitely being somebody who identifies as an introvert, even when you have a very people heavy,
and you're, I don't know if you'd admit this, you're super high levels of empathetic energy.
Yes.
And you absorb so many people's stuff.
Yeah.
And in your line of work,
it's
you
heavy.
absorb too much of it. Yeah.
So to be, if we want to use the word, an empath, and to be an introvert, like my my constant self is just very, very overwhelmed a lot. And there's a lot of external energy that I feel like I'm constantly having to like
manage,
push back on, because it gets overwhelming very quickly. So a big way that I decided, or a big thing that I felt would be helpful to manage that load, was working part-time. So I was lucky enough to find a part-time job, and that has been very, very helpful to at least have less time immersed in the thing that I'm trying to balance those energies with. So that's been very helpful. And because of that, I have had more time at home to rediscover things that I truly enjoy. And a big one has been like reading. I've been reading a lot of books lately, which has been so nice, because I loved doing that as a kid. So to rediscover my love of...
And in the last decade, you just haven't been able to throw yourself into... You read, but it was like academic books. Yeah,
it was sporadically, I would get to read like a book for fun here and there, but it wasn't consistent. And if anything, it was reading textbooks and taking notes and having to memorize and this very academic thing. And so now to just be able to read a fun fantasy novel with fairies or vampires or whatever the
and
world
it's like a
is.
Series too.
Yeah. So that has just felt so nice. But the funny thing is just that comes with having to balance like feeling guilt of like, oh, I'm just reading. So we're working on that too. But so just being immersed in something that I do find so relaxing and just fun has been really nice. And then
it makes me so happy, because like we were saying, your job, the level of expectation and the pressure and the amount of energy that, in a medical setting, a lot of patients expel a lot of like difficult energy to have to manage. And you, as someone who like absorbs a lot of people's energies, I know we're talking very like esoterically, like woo woo right now with like energies and stuff, but it's just, you absorb a lot of people's energies. I just know that about you. I'm so grateful in that, like, I know right now, or just maybe forever, you're never going to be able to like control the external factors in that work environment. But what you are able to control is where you balance that within your like weekly like schedule or like daily schedule. And for you to be able to compartmentalize a little bit more time for yourself to do a reset is like so big into just your overall like mental health. Because what I've noticed is that when you were working just like nonstop, there'd be times where you would be on call. So you were on call and you'd get a call at like 9 p.m. So, or even if you didn't get a call, I could sense you're stressed, because you're like, somebody's gonna call. Somebody's gonna call. I can't even sleep because somebody's gonna call.
You can't settle into...
To me, I like, me not coming from a medical background, one, huge respect for the people who can navigate that like intensely like that.
Absolutely.
It's just like, wow. But you recognize it in yourself in that, like, I like that you're kind of taking the pressure off a little bit. Because if you were to just stick to like your normal, what you've known about yourself, you would have just kept climbing that mountain. I'm going to keep doing it. But
I mean,
I don't know if you recognize in yourself that in the last year or so, we talk a lot about pointing our toes. And like, sometimes we don't know where we want to go, but I think we have an idea. So if we kind of point our toes in that direction, it gives us a little bit of the path. And I think you having the time now to even just read a book or read a series, like, is such a huge healing process
Yeah.
that like I don't even think we both realize is happening.
Yeah.
You're taking ownership back of like that pressure. We have to be very clear. This comes from a very privileged position that we're in.
Sure.
We're very lucky
Yeah.
that we can create a life that will allow for something like this.
Yeah.
And I'm just really happy to like see you experience your younger self who used to read books all the time now finally being able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been great. It's been great to also just like feel, like you said, take the pressure off a little bit, be able to breathe a little bit more and just kind of get lost in something that is just a silly story, and I don't have to memorize it. I don't have to worry about what the details are. It's just, there's no pressure, and it's just a fun thing to rediscover.
I personally think it opens your creative mind up. You don't identify as a creative person per se.
Yeah.
In the traditional sense, like I play music or like I do creative work like video and all that stuff.
Not a musician, I can't draw.
But like you and I purchased a home, again, coming from a place of like immense privilege that we're so lucky in this economy being able to like purchase our first home together.
Yeah.
And building this home with you, I defer to you on like kind of like the interior design of things. Like this office here that you're seeing, like this was all you. And it's funny because you would think that I would be the one that has like the eye for it.
Sure.
I have a taste for it, but you have the more complete vision, creatively speaking. So I like, I'm just because you come from like this medical place. Where does the visual like aesthetic of like interior design and space and white space come from?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean,
you have no idea.
I truly have no idea.
Yeah.
It's very important for me for like my home space to feel very calm, to feel very relaxing, to just I think I tend to be known as a little bit of a neat freak because I like everything to be in, it has a place that it just feels, I just want to feel good. I want to feel calm. I want to feel relaxed. I want somewhere where I can walk into and I can just breathe and the pressure goes away. And so I think I have just discovered over the years it, for some reason, yes, I don't consider myself a creative person, but I think with interior design, my brain does get to play a little bit. And I don't find a lot of things where I do feel like my brain kind of gets to have that fun, playfulness. And for some reason for me, it does translate into interiors a little bit, which is really fun. But I think it's about creating a space that I can feel relaxed, I can feel calm in, and somehow it all comes together.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm definitely messier than you.
Yeah.
I would say that I've kind of absorbed a little bit of that.
Yeah.
In a sense.
I think it rubbed off.
Yeah, rubbed
Maybe
off.
too much, I don't know.
No, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, I have this thing in the kitchen now when I'm cooking. I love that clean workspace thing, and I kind of go a little bit like the bear about it. Like I get a little intense when I'm cooking.
Yeah, I've learned, you cook a lot of our meals and I've learned I just leave you alone. I don't even offer to help anymore.
I don't know what it is. It's like I like the systems of like while I'm prepping and like cutting, the whole mise en place thing. Yeah. And like clearing the counters after like the next step or something like that. Or I don't get like super intense, but I just have this process. Yeah. And it's funny because sometimes you'll be behind me like taking care of other stuff and you're like a chronic putter awayer.
Yes.
And I'm like in my zone, like behind, yes chef, you know, and like I would have like the towel or something like that. Yeah. Like at a certain spot that I know in the back of my head, I can just do this like grab the towel. Yeah. And you would have like hung it back into where it was. Yeah. Yeah, my like, groove!
I got you again.
You messed with my groove.
Yeah, that's why I just leave you alone now. But I mean, and I've had to learn, and I think I hope I've done okay at making some compromises because again, for me, I don't want to see visual clutter because again, somehow for some reason that impacts my brain. It gives me stress, so I prefer just like clean, intentional everything. And I have had to make compromises over the years because I will take just like clean and the visual of something over function. I don't always care about function. It's for me, it's if I don't have to see it, I don't have to think about it. It's not going to stress me out. I would prefer it to not be there. And we've had to come up with some compromises because for you, function is still very important. And so I've had to learn a little bit to be more considerate of function. And maybe we can make the function prettier, or it'll look better, or what's the compromise there?
Oh man, that's like the sweet spot for me. Is when you have an aesthetic kind of opinion, but I have a functional opinion. And when they meet,
it feels good.
Oh, it's like amazing. And over the years, I would say that I'm leaning more towards your side, especially with like my creative work. To give people a little bit of background, the day before we recorded this, I was setting up all the equipment and all the cables and all the stands in my kind of office space. And I don't really do like interviews in my space because usually it's all remote, right? So it's easy. It's all like on the camera, webcam, or whatever. But for this one, obviously it's in person. So I was setting up all the stuff and I just realized I had cables everywhere. The stands, it was stressing me out. I sent a picture to you and just like, I'm gonna explode. This is too much. And I think short of me buying all this extra equipment to make it like fit this style or whatever, it's just not worth it right now because I don't do in studio interviews at this time. Like, so with the current equipment that I had, it was just so much. And I realized, wow, I'm not the same person as I used to be when it comes to the clutter. Because even right now, like we have a couple little tripods here and there. It's still too much. And I get it. This whole like mental clarity is so important for you, and it makes a lot of sense because your work environment is so unpredictable. And it's everything everywhere all at once. That it makes a lot of sense that when you're home and home is supposed to feel like home, that means mental clarity. And like you said, me being kind of in tune to like just energy of our environment. Like for me, clutter has a very specific energy. Or I mean, you asked earlier about something else that I do to help outside of work with things. One of the kind of hobbies that I became obsessed with after moving back to Michigan from Florida are house plants. Just because, you know, Florida, it's sunny in summer most of the year. And in Michigan, we have very long, very gray, cold winters. And I was just like, I need to see something green. Like I'm going to lose my mind. And so I've kind of had this obsession with collecting houseplants over the last, 5 or 6 years now. But also there's something about plants for me that just bring a very calm energy. It's like they're alive and bring some kind of vibrancy and just... I don't know. It just feels good to be surrounded by green and plants. This is what's interesting. From a cleanliness perspective in like a clean space, you don't want a lot of clutter, right? Because that brings on clutter. I think you know where I'm going with this.
I think so.
For some reason, what is it about plants where it's just like you would equate more plants as clutter, but it doesn't translate that way?
No, especially because we did like a little mini haul, was it last weekend? And we bought more plants.
As if we needed more. Like, in your head, you're like, we have plenty of plants. But then we buy more, and you're just like, oh, yeah, it fits right there.
Because I even had to ask you, like, where I put one of them, and I was like, does this feel okay to you? Does it feel like it's in the way, or, like, it's too cluttered? And you were fine with it. And I was like, okay, because it was, like, it could almost borderline be in the way. But for me, when I saw it there, it made me happy, and it made sense. And yes, there's another thing there where if it was anything else, it probably would drive me crazy. But I don't know, there's something about just being surrounded by plants that also, for some reason, it just feels good. I don't know what kind of energy those little plants carry, but it's something that, to me, it's like palpable. I also feel that way about animals, though. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. So minimizing clutter, plants and animals is the exception.
Yeah.
Are there any other exceptions to like you can't have too much of something? I got one, but go ahead.
I'm trying to think because even like rediscovering my love of reading and books, I'm just like, because I prefer physical books over like a Kindle or something like that.
Yeah.
But even I'm starting to get worried in the back of my brain about
books.
like what do I do with all these books? Am I going to have to switch to a Kindle?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have to decide, well, which books do I want physical copies of and which ones am I okay being on a Kindle, because books will give me that stress of just like I'm accumulating things and then I start to...
Books look cool though.
They do.
Like you can put it anywhere and it's just like, oh, this is like, it's books. Like,
yeah, but
this is a well-read person. Yeah.
At a certain point, for me, there would be a tipping point.
It's too much?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Why? Was it going to be books?
No.
Oh.
Can you guess?
Of other things that I'm okay having a lot of?
For me, utility knives.
Oh, like box cutters?
Box cutters.
Yeah.
I think I converted you.
You did.
In that, like, for some reason, whether it's like you get an Amazon package or whatever, or like you need to break down something or you need to cut something. I'm always looking for like some kind of knife or box cutter or whatever.
Yeah.
And I started stashing just like whenever we'd accumulate a box cutter, I'd put it in like a specific room.
Yeah.
Just so I always had access to it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you were just like, why don't you just put the one that we have in that one drawer and then you know to go there? And I'm just like, no, it's different. It's different.
Yeah. You did convert me, but why I'm okay with it is because number one, it's still just like one item scattered throughout like different rooms, and then it's small, so it's easy to tuck away into a drawer.
Yeah.
So then it does become that convenience factor of I'm becoming better at accepting things for convenience, and you can put it in a pretty basket or in a drawer.
Yeah, so I highly
see it and look at it.
Right. So I highly recommend, if you don't do this, just
have a box cutter.
have like multiple box cutters in different spaces that you can hide. Like it doesn't have to be. You would never allow it just sitting there or whatever.
No, like don't set it on the counter. I don't want to see it, but if it's in the drawer right there, then I understand, because again, an Amazon box or whatever.
Yeah. You don't need it until you do.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those pat your shoulder type situations when you need it and you're just like, I knew I needed this.
Do you feel that way about headlamps?
Headlamps? That could be one. I would love a headlamp option. Wow, we went on a tangent with like, let's see where we're at here. I'm feeling good. I mean, are there any other lessons that you feel like you've learned? I mean, I guess let me do this.
Okay.
Every guest that I have, I ask them, what are you currently working on? Like, what is something that you want to get better at?
Yeah.
Kind of in your next chapter.
Yeah. I think, so with our friends, we don't really do New Year's resolutions, but we come up with like these themes.
Yeah.
And this year, so I love Taylor Swift. And
it's a Swifties household over here.
It is.
Yeah.
And one of I came up with two themes where I'm actually proud of myself, because I feel like I've, for potentially the first time, have like fully embraced my themes, and I can look back on the year and say, yes, I made definitive changes in correlation with my theme. But I think it's themes that I think will continue to carry through not just this year, but moving forward in general. So things that I'm still working on. One of my themes was rebalance everything with where do I want to be spending most of my time and things like that. So going from my full-time job to my part-time job, just to shift the balance of, it was important for me to just have more time at home, have more time for the things I want to invest in, whether it's books or plants or spending time with the dogs. But then where the Taylor Swift comment comes in is I kind of laughed and I was like, you know what, this is a great year for me to be in my Reputation era.
Yeah.
So I think of this as like my Reputation era year, but what that ultimately means for me is just advocating for myself, just because I am not the type of person that likes to speak up, that likes to make waves. I very much prefer put my head down, stay quiet, fly under the radar, just a little bit invisible, but like just let me do my thing and I'm good.
Yeah.
That's very much always been my MO.
Yeah.
And I think as I've gotten older and just grown in different ways, I'm like, you know what? Like,
Yeah.
no, like we are going to speak up a little bit more. We are going to be more assertive. We are going to say what we need and speak our mind a little bit more about things.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's a very like reputation kind of energy
yeah.
because that might seem very tame for a lot of people, but for me, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big energy shift.
Right.
So for me, I think it's just continuing that, and I have been pretty good at that this year, I would say.
Like advocating for the things that you feel is the right thing for you.
Yeah, and just speaking up and being like, hey, like, I don't think I'm okay with this. And trying to do it with as much kindness as possible, right? Like, I'm not trying to walk around and just be like this mean, grumpy lady all the time, but doing it with as much kindness as I can, but also just being like, hey, like, I don't know that this is working, or I don't know if this is okay, or I don't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think I've done a really good job at that. And for me, it is exhausting because, like I said, I like to be quiet, keep my head down, just continuing to be my own self-advocate and not just being like, well, we tried.
Yeah.
So.
And I see that in you so much because you and I are always talking about being that for ourselves, like being able to advocate for ourselves. And it's nice to have a partner that you can kind of talk through things because, you know, I think in the moment when you are either putting your foot down on something or trying to communicate something, it's uncomfortable for us because we're both very people pleaser type and we don't want to ruffle any feathers. We just want everybody to get along.
Everybody just be happy. And, it's fine.
Yeah, like because at the end of the day, it's just like we want people to just feel. We don't want people to like not like us.
Yeah.
That's like at the end of the day.
And for some reason I feel like we get kind of like caught, we're always like in the middle of very like polar opposite sides, and a lot of times we're like the more neutral party, or trying to balance the things or energy or personalities or whatever. And so I think just being a little bit more like, hey, you know what? Like I do.
Right, but to see you, for us to talk about it behind the scenes and have all those doubts because we're in a safe space to be like, I don't know if I should be saying this and all that stuff. And then for you to put that into practice and like allowing yourself to communicate what you need in the way that you do, which is never like rude or mean or anything. Like you're just saying it. It's something that I noticed that you've been working really hard on. And it's something that you and I are really proud of continuing to do because it's hard. It doesn't get easier.
No.
I mean, you might be able to like lean into the discomfort. Doesn't mean it's easy.
No, not at all.
So I see it and like really proud of you for.
Thank you.
Cool. So let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up, I just wanted to say for this being the 50th episode, I have to give credit where credit is due. This podcast would not be possible without you. And I say that because for people who do know us, they know that you and I had a podcast together before Craft Talk.
We did.
It was called Kitchen Table Convos.
Yeah.
We put in probably around 30 something episodes.
Yeah.
So we're still at that 1%.
Yeah, we still made it.
And so you kind of get a little bit of a story arc of the journey that we've been through, and you know, it kind of ended with you in PA school.
I was just thinking about that, about when did we film the last episode, and it was probably PA school because I didn't have time.
Like things were starting to get busy, so we'd sporadically put out an episode, and it'd be like, I don't know when we'll be back, and we just never came back.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm happy with what that is. 30 episodes, honestly, is plenty of you and me for me to share with the world.
Yeah.
I honestly enjoy our conversations so much that like I think I'm in a place of life where I don't really need to share that. I think the 30 episodes or whatever it's just plenty. I want to keep it to myself. I'm selfish, guys. But anyways, I was going to say this thing wouldn't be possible because I don't think I knew I was capable of creating Craft Talk until you and I started Kitchen Table Convos.
It was like the catalyst.
It was, because if you were to tell me before that I was going to have a podcast, me knowing like how introverted I am and how I overthink a lot of ideas, so I feel like when I'm trying to communicate it, I always worry that I'm going to stumble or like I'm not going to be able to say what I really meant or try to communicate it in a way that makes sense. It felt safe and open for me to learn how to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I want to credit that to you. I also want to credit like the people who I've interviewed
Yeah,
the past 50 episodes. I know that I do some solo episodes, but the people who I've interviewed, it's crazy to think that I've done 50 of these.
50 is a big deal.
And I think if I was to overthink it, I can find myself going, 50 is nothing. And that's crap. Like, that's not true.
Yeah.
It's a huge accomplishment. And to celebrate that with you, and for me to be able to tell you, like, it just wouldn't have been possible because I didn't believe it in myself. So I just want to thank you for that. And I really admire the person that you are in the sense of how creative you are and how empathetic you are and how angry you get at certain things. And you're just like, oh, it's just like things that make you go crazy, because it makes me feel less crazy.
Yeah.
Because you and I have the behind the scenes conversations. It's like, this is driving me insane. The ads on this video is like just like maddening, like things like that, right? So it's like you and I are on a lot of, as different as we are, there are just so many things that we are on the same wavelength on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me as number 50. Yes. And I'm glad that I get to watch you do this, and it's something that I can tell you really enjoy. So it's fun for me to be able to see like you do something that you really like and you're able to make time for. So. Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to do an outro?
No. Trying to put me on the spot.
Well, no. I think at some point in the podcast I made you like do the intro or outro.
An intro or an out, one of the two. And I was just like, no, I didn't prepare for this. Like, what am I supposed to say?
Yeah.
Just wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Let's get it over with. The dogs are taking a nap. They're probably waking up soon.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Craft Talk. Tito and Amanda signing out. We'll catch you next time. Bye.